My name's David Reed, and my debut memoir is Uphill and Into the Wind, a 1970s bike and hike odyssey from the Garden State to the Golden Gate. In 1974, I rode my bicycle across the United States with two friends, 5,420 miles. We spent 5 months traveling. We spent almost two of those months backpacking in the national parks. We crossed the Continental Divide on our bicycles 11 times. And the book is based on the journals that I kept that year. I still have all the journals. I don't know. Got them right here if you want to see. And um, and they formed the first draft of the book. So it's one of these things that it's an odyssey. There were a lot of exploits in natural history. The story chronicles the sudden and surprising glories of nature, the raw beauty of the land, and the ferocious grandeur of the American landscape. When my dad passed away, he lived a good long life, but he did something that helped change World War II. And I thought, oh gosh, I should write my story. And I got 50 pages in of my earliest childhood memories, and then I hit myself in the head and said, it's the bike trip. I have all the journals. So that was the first draft. I dictated it into the computer. This was when Dragon Dictate first came out. And I dictated it with a boom mic. The first draft was done in 2.5 months. And I spent 6 years polishing. Um, what else can I tell you? It's true grit. It's a memoir. It's an adventure memoir, and it takes place chronologically. So there's only one small flashback in the beginning of the book. But there's a lot of, with fiction writers have a whole bunch of things they can do. This is not like that. It's all true grit. Anybody that's interested in nature, in outdoor adventures, in bicycling, backpacking, it's right for them. But I've had a lot of readers who didn't fall into those categories and love the book. So I still get wonderful feedback, which is great. Sometimes I get these, emails from people I have no idea who they are, and that's the greatest thing. For me, one of the big things about this, and it takes a lot of time to write a book, is that I felt that this was a story that really had to be told. When we were doing this, we were young. We didn't think about what we were doing so much as what we were going to get to the next day and how much peanut butter we were going to eat. Um, but as time went on, I then start when I was writing the book, I thought, gosh, we were early adapters. And the more I thought about it, I realized we were pioneers. We didn't see another uh, cross-country cyclist from Shenandoah National Park all the way to Colorado. That's a vast stretch of land in the Midwest. We didn't see any other cycle tourists. This was before Bicentennial. Um, in fact, we met those people kind of by quirk of fate on our trip. They were looking for routes to bring people across the country in 1976, and we met them and gave them our input, and it was a great surprise. My writing process, again, was different for the book because I had the journals. But I continue to write. And my writing process, do I write every day? Well, there are periods when I write every day for weeks at a time. And then there are, I want to say dry periods or I have to, it has to be right. I have to feel inspired. But I'm writing another book called Memoirs of a Tree Hugger. And there are about 24 different trees that touched me. So I still write. And so I write every day when I can. I wrote today, the time of day I write, you try to get a pattern. I learned this from Twyla Tharp was one of my inspirations. I don't know if you know, she's a choreographer, and she has a routine that she'd follow every day. 5 o'clock in the morning, she get up early. I get up early, so I write early. And there are days when I don't, but and then what's my my favorite part of the writing process is, when you wake up in the middle of the night and you have this inspiration, and then you think, okay, as soon as I get up, that's what I'm writing about. And the hardest part of writing to me is the editing. What could I offer young writers as advice? I remember seeing it was at some high school event my son had gone to, and it was about writing, and there was this big sign over the door that said, "Write in haste, edit in cold blood." And I've always tried to do that because you distill the words on the page, you distill it down like maple syrup, and it just gets better. And that's what to me, the craft is about. And I learned a lot about that. I was in a writing group for 5 years. I had a neighbor who was a published author, and she said, "You ought to go to the Southern California Writers Conference." And I got in last minute, and they have they're called Rogue Read and Critiques. So you bring your pages, and the first one, this uh, editor, she said, "You give me your pages, I'm going to read them." And you're with a bunch of strangers, and I'm not a timid guy, but my heart was in my throat here. She's reading my story, my life. I poured my soul out on the page, and I got a lot of positive reinforcement. So then I joined a writers group, and for the first 2.5 of the 5 years, I read snippets from my book every other week. From my manuscript. For the second 2.5 years, then I read other things that I've written about that are not published yet, but will be. But it was a great way to have feedback about what you're writing. Nowadays, I have my editor in chief is the woman I've married to, my wife Carolyn, and she's very good at critiquing. But I'm trying to get some beta readers for this new book. But that's really what helped me craft Uphill and Into the Wind so well. I think that's why it's so well written, is because I had a lot of polishing. I spent 2.5 months for the first draft and 6 years polishing. Some of these were so hard to read, I had to use a jeweler's loupe. They were written in pencil. This one's written in pen, but chicken scratch. You're camping. We slept on the ground, and last thing you do before it's dark, we're writing little things down what we did. But it really helped because, it was 40 something years later I started writing this book, and the more you remember, details come floating in that, oh yeah, we did this. I also had my two bicycle buddies, Rusty and Susie, to lean on, although their memory wasn't as good as mine. So. In fact, in the book, when we get to Glacier Park, I put in a 3/4 of a page of what Rusty wrote in his journal. And then I wrote after that, we are traveling with the reincarnation of Jack Kerouac, because that was all stream of consciousness stuff, up on the borderline, in between the sands of time, that kind of stuff. So he did, but anyway, and we've stayed good friends ever since. I was 24, Rusty was 22, Susie was 19 when we left. Susie had never been away from home before for a long stretch and had never ridden on a 10 speed before we got the idea to go on this trip. She was a friend of my baby sister's, I'll call her. And going up the first hill, so we rode from east to west, from East Orange, New Jersey to the West Coast. And that's why it's called Into the Wind. The first hill is called, back in West Orange, is called First Mountain. And I get halfway up and I stop to see where Susie is, and she's way down at the bottom walking her bike up. And I just thought, oh, this is going to be a long summer. But it turns out that 2 weeks later, she was right there in the saddle, not very far behind us. So she adapted really well. She became a lioness. So she's one of the real heroes of the story. Being this young girl that kind of went along with these two guys and this crazy adventure, and she did it. Yeah. I think she wanted to get away from home. She wasn't dating either of us, and it was platonic all the way. We were like brother and sisters. Yeah. So some of the things that happened, I mean, when we got to Colorado, we rode our bicycles up to Estes Park, and we rode up North St. Vrain up to Estes Park, and that was I forget 16 miles uphill and a mile and a half down into Estes Park. And then when we got there, we camped, and there were these two guys from Missouri, and they were going to climb Long's Peak. And they saw us, and we were pretty fit. We had pedaled from New Jersey, and they invited us to come along. So we did. We climbed Long's Peak with them. And that was a week-long adventure because it was 3 days out, the climb, and then 3 days back. And, so one thing I should tell you is that along with the journals that I kept, I had 15 pounds of camera gear. So I have slides from the whole trip, and I've had most of them digitized. You know, in the book, because this is a memoir, it's cream colored paper, and I have some centerfold photos in here, but they're black and white. So when I was writing this, it was before COVID started. I published right after COVID started, but I put in a QR code at the back of the book so people could find, if they buy the book, they could find the photographs in color. And there's a lot more of them than what's in the centerfold. Now, QR codes were on the wane at the time. They were just kind of, some great ideas, see them in a couple of places, but when COVID hit, everybody did QR codes. So it really became ubiquitous, and that really helped me a lot. And people love the photos. And I have maps too. I got from a guy at the National Park Service the rights to use a physical map of the United States. It's 250 meg file, and I charted our bike route across the map. That's on the website. You could see it without the QR codes, but it's on my website. It was a squirrely route, It was one of these deals. We headed south from New Jersey but just before we left, it had snowed, and Susie had when we were training, one of the rides we took to train, she hit some black ice. This was in February, and that was the end of her training. So, so we decided, well, we better head south rather than going through the ridge and valley of Pennsylvania for 400 miles. And then when we got to we did Shenandoah Park. We backpacked there, and we did Skyline Drive, which is a 105-mile crinkly worm-shaped road and one of the most beautiful roads in the country. And then we made it to the Cumberland Gap, across the prairie, and then into the Rockies. We went up, just went right up the spine of the Rockies. One of our objectives was to see the great national parks. Well, we did Shenandoah, we did Daniel Boone National Forest, Land Between the Lakes, which isn't a national park, and then Rocky Mountain, Teton, Yellowstone, and Glacier, up to the Canadian border, then over. We got turned away at the Canadian border. I didn't have enough money, and I had long hair and a beard, and they wanted to know if I smoked marijuana. And they were like, I don't know, it was weird. And then by the time we got to Washington, the border crossing was on this little quiet suburban street, this little kiosk with a red striped, uh, trying to think what you call them, like an arm. And these guys saw us coming, and they just raised the arm and didn't ask any questions. We went right through. So we spent one day in Canada. Then we went to Olympic National Park, and then down the coast, where we did not see the sunset over the ocean for 1,000 miles because it's so foggy. Yeah. Mist dripping off your face. And anyway, and then we got to San Francisco in the heyday, still in the heyday of Haight-Ashbury. When we got to San Francisco, there was this festival, and Jerry Garcia and Merle Saunders were playing, and Wavy Gravy. I don't know if you know who he is. He was the MC of Woodstock. He was there, and he was emceeing the show, and people were lighting up these big fat joints and just passing them off into the crowd. And we ate a half-gallon ice cream that day. We used up on big days, we'd use as much as 6,000 calories. Rusty and I didn't know Rusty before started planning the trip. And a friend said, "You got to meet this guy. He's just like you." And he set up a meeting. That's in the book. It's in the story. Well, and that was just Rusty. And how Susie got into this, we were at this potluck at some church potluck, and it was all, kumbaya, holding hands, breaking bread. And Susie sat across from me and she said, "Wow, I'd really like to go on a trip like that." And, this was, the 70s. I was kind of like, sure. And yeah, exactly. And Rusty was a little more uh, circumspect about it, but it worked out for the better. She was a real asset to the group. People received us much better, I think, because we had Susie with us. Um, there were times when we had uh, terrible weather and people would take her in, and Rusty and we could sleep on the ground or whatever. But so people really took a shine to Susie, and that really helped a lot. Yeah. She also brought us some grace. We were on better behavior because she was with us. It didn't even enter into our thinking that way, but it's just that she was, yeah, she enlightened the group in a way. Yeah. Hybrid, hybrid. Acorn Publishing. Yeah, Acorn published my book. Yeah, I'm very happy with them. And they did everything they said they would do for me and more. And I'm still see them all the time. It's a lot of hugs. I am hopeful they'd consider publishing my next book, but it's going to be, I've got so many photographs that what Holly said to me, she goes, "Oh, well, then it's a picture book." And I said, "Yeah, I guess so." And so that's a whole different publishing structure. And so I'm looking for a university press that, I'm not there yet. I want to get this. I've had my editor who edited me twice for Uphill and Into the Wind has had one pass at it so far. She'll get another one. And she's given me some good feedback. And I've got someone who can design this, the layout, but I want to see where it goes. I know it'll get published somehow. And when you're hybrid published, that's one of the questions I think that came up is about marketing. I've done a bunch of stuff. I launched during COVID, so my launches were all Zoom. I had a author of the month special thing with the San Diego Public Library. I had 90 people on the Zoom, but it was all Zoom. And then I had a bunch of that. I had writers, book clubs. I had in the winter time, I had a bike club from Minnesota, and I presented to them. I forget there was like I don't know 20 something people, and I get done with the presentation. The first question is, "Why the hell did you ride from east to west? That's the hard way." Well, it is into the wind. I mean, the prevailing winds travel west to east, uh, and but the amount of the American landscape that we experienced is unforgettable. That's one of the things in the book that I feel is really strong. The grandeur of the American landscape. Tornadoes, snow, whiteouts, fog, everything. Bears, mad dogs. If I didn't have a premonition on the Washington coast and knew to get off the road, I wouldn't be here today. And I had heard only last year about somebody that was killed by a logging truck. Those roads are so tiny, and those guys they're hell bent for leather. They don't care. And if you look closely, you'll notice on the cover, we didn't have helmets. We didn't wear helmets. My message is get out there, do stuff, go outside. Everybody lives like this now. There's a worldwide epidemic of myopia, seriously. And it's from this. My kids do it. And I'm afraid my grandkids now are, they're about starting to get to that. They know what their parents' phone's about. And it's about getting outside. It really is. And just the other day, Saturday morning. Oh, the day. So I did the book festival one day, and I did Bike the Bay. I know you were in San Diego. Yeah, so you know about Bike the Bay over the Coronado Bridge. I did that the next day. Saturday morning, early in the morning, I look out my bathroom window and I see this incredible atmospheric condition. Cowles Mountain, which is visible from our house. The shoulder of Cowles Mountain was all blanketed by this shroud of fog. And then the fog was moving down the sides, kind of like you'd see in the Bay Area even. And just because I was looking out the window. So I went outside in my bathrobe and took videos and pictures. And then when I posted it, people were like, wow, I've never seen that before here. So that's my message. Get outside, travel. Life is like a book, and those who don't travel read only the first page. That's a quote from St. Augustine.